Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Haverford Township Board of Commissioners meeting for October. I'd like to announce that prior to this meeting, we met in executive session on a legal and personnel matter. Mr. Berman, would you please call the roll? Okay.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Here.
Mr. Oliva.
Here.
Mr. McCluskey.
Here.
Mr. Siegel. Here. Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Mr. Quinn.
Here.
Dr. Hart.
Here.
Mr. Holmes.
Here.
And Mr. Wexler.
Here. Would you all please stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance, started by our Chief of Police, John Viola. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Our first item this evening is to appoint some new police officers. I would ask our civil service, come up. Mrs. Bocello.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Okay. Presently, our police department has 2 vacancies. And the list of candidates that you have before you was approved by the board on December the 9th, 2019. Now, the top candidates to be presented have successfully passed the written and oral tests for entry-level positions. The candidates have been presented with conditional offers of employment pending completion of the hiring process. For the first vacancy, I'll read from the approved list. 3 names to the board for consideration. The board will then engage in a formal vote. First one is James Adamski. Adamski, okay. Michael Guidera and Randall Kennedy.
Motion to accept the list. You do that?
List is already accepted.
The list is already accepted. We'd entertain a motion to
The
appoint
list,
one of those candidates.
All right, I'll make a motion to appoint Joseph Adamski.
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 Second.
Motion made and seconded to appoint Joseph Adamski to the Haverford Township Police Department. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
so they can
Yes.
understand you.
Congratulations, Mr. Adamski.
Commissioner, if I could, Joseph
Yes.
is 27 years old from Media, PA, and has been employed by Temple University Police Department since 2017. And prior to Temple was a part-time officer with the Bethel Township PD. Joseph is a graduate of Newman University with a BA in Criminal Justice.
Thank you, Chief.
Did you get Dan?
Okay.
Did Dan vote?
Yes, he did.
One in here, sorry.
All right, for the second vacancy, again, I'll read the 3 names to the board for consideration, and again, the board will engage in a formal vote. It's Michael Guidera, Randall Kennedy, Sean McLaughlin.
Make a motion that we accept Michael Guidera.
And I'll second that. Motion made and seconded. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Congratulations. Chief, tell us.
Michael Guidera, Michael's 28 years old and originally from Alden, but currently resides in Philadelphia. Michael's been employed with the Philadelphia Police Department since 2017. Michael graduated from Westchester University with a BS in Criminal Justice.
Thank you very much.
Glad to get out of Florida.
Yeah, he will. Commissioner Sank, as usual, thank you for support and keeping the police department to the levels that they should be. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Civil Service Commission, who is always pleased on behalf of the township to provide the service for the board.
Thank you for your work.
Thank you for your work on the Civil Service Commission, the interview process, and all the work that you do in conjunction with the police department to find us these quality officers. So thank you very much. Our next item is the Township Auditor Update.
I have reviewed the warrants and expenditures for this meeting. I found no irregularities, and all my questions were answered to my satisfaction.
Thank you very much. Our next item is the Citizens Forum. We have one registered comment that I will read, and if there's anybody else on the Zoom call that wants to speak, you'll let me know, Mr. Berman. Dear Commissioners, given the recession, the relative lack of federal aid to local governments, the uncertainty around the future economic outlook, the Delaware County reassessment, the decreased federal income tax deductibility of property taxes, and the already high millage of Haverford Township municipal tax relative to nearby communities, it is important for the township to look for additional sources of revenue to lessen the burden on its taxpayers. Haverford College is one possible source of revenue. Located at the edge of the 5th Ward and far from the population center of the township, the college has a 216-acre campus that receives 1, trash collection, 2, sewage, 3, police protection, 4, fire protection, and 5, a polling place as recently as the 2019 election. To my knowledge, however, the college has never paid real estate taxes to Haverford Township. I believe that this was an acceptable arrangement in the past. Yet, because Haverford College seeks increasingly to behave like a private entity, barring the public from its campus for an indefinite period, the college should be taxed as a private entity. Although it is far from clear whether Haverford College should be considered as a purely public charity within the meaning of the Institutions of Purely Public Charity Act 10, paragraph 371 et sequitur, at the college's PPC status should be reviewed. Let us assume for a brief moment that the college falls within the purview of the act. Nothing in that act prevents the commission from seeking and entering into agreements for payment in lieu of taxes with the college. A full discussion of the payment in lieu of taxes concept is beyond the scope of this statement, but municipalities throughout the Commonwealth have received revenue from pilot agreements with nonprofit institutions for more than 20 years. He references a website that we can put on our website as well. The township should seek payment in lieu of taxes payments from Haverford College, as well as other colleges and universities within the municipal boundaries. With an endowment of more than $500 million, Haverford College can afford payments in lieu of taxes because it could not easily move from the present campus, and because of its communitarian ethos, the college may be surprisingly willing to comply. In the meetings to come, I'll present additional information on what could be an exciting new concept in revenue generation for the township and for the Haverford Township School District. Sincerely yours, John Williams, 730 Panmure Road. That's the only registered comment that we have. Is there anyone that's requesting their hand raised on the?
Let me take a look, 1 second,
Okay.
please. No, there are no hands raised.
Being that will conclude the citizens forum. What I'll do is Amy, if you could just address one or two of those concerns and out detailed in Mr. Williams' comment for us, such as what they do pay and what's going on.
Sure, just to clarify a couple of the points, Haverford College certainly is one of our largest property owners here in the township. They do pay sewer rent. They pay sewer just like every other resident or business does at the same rate. And actually, this year, they paid over $127,000 in sewer rents to the township. They only get trash collection at selected areas within the campus. There's some private homes on the campus, things like that. They also, when that happens, they are charged the same $245 per residential unit as every other resident is charged. And in 2020, they paid over $6,000 in trash fee alone. They also do have a few residential homes, as I mentioned. They are not tax exempt, and they have real estate tax, county, school, and township, just like we all do. And they paid about $11,000 in realty tax. Also, they have a cell tower that they pay real estate tax on as well. So the pilot it's not a new concept, it is out there. Probably the most important thing they provide right now is an EMS station for one of our ambulances on their campus free of charge. So that also is a highly valuable service they give us.
Correct. Just to repeat, they do provide our emergency medical services with an ambulance station that covers that half of the township. So thank you. Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll, according to the note, we'll be hearing more. Our next item is Mr. Berman, Township Manager update.
Good evening. The biggest topic that we're hearing about these days are the ballot drop boxes, and there is one in front of this building. It has been installed. The county Bureau of Elections handles that. Unfortunately, the security camera that the county is going to install has not been installed yet. And so we are waiting for that. We don't control the drop box. It's locked. It's not in service yet. The County Bureau of Elections controls that. And I know all the commissioners have received phone calls. We've received probably hundreds of phone calls today about that. As soon as it's active, we'll put an announcement out. I know the county will do so. I was looking on social media earlier this evening, and they say that they anticipate that most drop boxes will be installed and ready for use by early next week. And so that's the most up-to-date information we can provide at this point.
Dave, so the drop box is there, but you can't put,
It's locked.
it's locked.
It's locked, it's secure.
But you can't put a ballot.
You can't put anything in there now because it's locked, yes.
And that's because we don't have a camera, right?
Because the county has not installed their security camera.
Right.
We have 24-hour surveillance, but they are responsible for monitoring that drop box.
That's fine. Let's just
But
make it.
if you have a ballot, just to remind everybody, if you have a ballot, you can still mail it in. There's 3 weeks
Yes,
to the
plenty of
election,
time.
plenty of time for it to get there. So if you have a ballot right now, you don't have to wait for the drop box, you can just put it in the mail.
Or you can take it directly to the Bureau of Elections and
In media.
media, and there's also 3 county offices, so there are many options. But it's unfortunate they're not willing to accept our cameras as being adequate, so it's kind of a duplication that doesn't seem to be really necessary, but we'll deal with it.
Not a responsibility.
Yeah, I think they have to accept responsibility with their own system, so, although we'd be more than happy to use ours. Anything else?
Yes, leaf season is on the way, and we, this year, are going to start a little bit later than usual. It's been published on the website. Yes, one of the biggest complaints is that our guys, our leaf crews are out early doing nothing. And so we're going to start a little bit later this year, first week in November. The schedule is posted on our website, and we'll send out reminders as the date approaches.
I just want to commend you and Dan for that decision. I think that's a decision that makes a lot of sense, not only now, but going forward.
Thank you. Dan Mariani is online, so Dan, that's one for you.
I will concur with that because I'm in the first ward and I'm like one of the earliest ones. There's no leaves on the ground.
It's wasted.
Also,
Especially this year.
Steve, I agree. We always get, people are complaining all the time about the trucks having nothing to pick up in the first and second wards.
The only thing, I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to remind the board that when we get to the end of the season, you know, if there's any winter weather during the fall, all bets are off. We're going to be pushing that back. But if there is any winter weather, we'll resume the collection in the order that it was originally planned. When we're done, we have to switch all of the equipment back over for winter weather operations, so we're prepared for whatever January and February and March have in store for us. So when we're done Ward 5 that last week, we're done. And we'll do our best to clean up if we have to, but we want to remind residents to keep an eye on the website, social media, and our constant contact emails so that you know when the schedule is, so that you don't miss it, because we don't want you to be that frustrated. And I think I heard Mr. Siegel trying to say something.
Mr. Siegel, yeah?
No, I just was having trouble hearing.
If I could just add one thing to that, there's like a 3-week period between our first collection in the 5th Ward and the last collection. So I'm suggesting to our residents, not only in the 5th Ward, but township-wide, that they look at the schedule and not put the leaves out, 2 weeks, 3 weeks early, and to make sure they put them in the street. Make sure they put them on the curb and on their property rather than the street, because particularly on steep slope where roads are steep, leaves obviously clog the stormwater inlets. So I urge people to wait. Leaves aren't going to kill your lawn, so wait and put them to the curb, at the last minute if at all possible.
That's a very good point. Thank you, Mr. Lewis. I'd also like to thank you, Mr. Lewis, for raising the question about Halloween. I've never worked in a community where we regulated Halloween hours. Certainly in Haverford Township, we have a diverse neighborhoods, several neighborhoods, and we're not going to be able to regulate the hours or whether someone wants to participate in Halloween trick-or-treating or not, especially during the pandemic. We've relied on Jim McCann's for guidance and interpretation of the CDC guidelines for health and safety. We've relied on John Viola and Steve Poole from Emergency Management to help us understand and protect our employees and protect the residents. But at this point, I think it's good for us to just try and interpret briefly the guidelines from CDC. Chester County Health Department, through the Delaware County Council, has provided some guidelines. And so I'm going to bring Jim McCann's up briefly to just talk about those guidelines for us.
Thank you, Commissioners. This is a fluid situation. Obviously, nobody's dealt with anything like this before, but again, it calls for common sense. And quite a few communities are doing things like proposing that people move their treats outdoors, maybe on a table outside, trying to avoid the people coming in and out of houses. As much as we can spread out people, the better. Reminding that a mask you're wearing for your costume isn't protective. You need a protective mask, or maybe incorporate a mask into the costume. So it'll probably be a lot of mummies this year, but they are encouraging any number of places, any number of Department of Health or the CDC itself. We're trying to encourage people not to gather in a group for parties, hay rides, that kind of thing. Anything that, any kind of frightening kind of things that could get a kid screaming or yelling and cause that kind of infection, but nobody, that cross contamination, but nobody wants to cancel the event. We're just trying to make it safer. So over the next week or so, I'll continue to put out information to you to send out to your residents, and as well as posted on the township website. So we're going to keep it as fluid as we can, but ask people just to be a little imaginative, keep it safe, no handmade treats, just do commercially wrapped things and put them out. If there's a group of people at a house, a family, as they move on, then walk up and not jam everybody up at the front of the house. Those things are kind of common sense, and I think we'll still enjoy the Halloween. It's not going to be the same, but at least it'll still be enjoyable.
And I think the easiest way is just, if you don't want to do it, just turn off your light and shut your door, and then nobody will come.
Agreed. And I think people be respectful of that. If there's anybody at risk, I don't think they should feel compelled to participate. We all understand it. It's a lot of pressure this year.
Yep.
Is the Chester County recommendation, I didn't get a chance to read their recommendation, is it consistent, I assume, with the CDC? And
Yes.
the CDC is rather lengthy, and I'm not sure anybody's going to read it. Is there a way to simplify it?
It is, and it addresses all of the Halloween events, like adult parties, everything. They're trying to reduce all of the things associated with it, the commercial hayride things, and people having the spooky movie outside and inviting the whole neighborhood over. They're trying to tell them how unwise that is, just to spread things out. So if we kind of do, dice it out to just the trick-or-treating part, I think we pretty much just covered it. And there may be more coming. So people are putting out some pretty interesting ways. I know people are talking about putting out clothesline and treats on clips and stuff for kids to grab. And they're coming up with different ideas to just kind of spread people out and not bring people together reaching into a common bucket for candies or a common plate or something.
Yeah. I would ask maybe that we could just cut this segment of the meeting, and maybe we could put it on our webpage. Sure. And also we could disseminate this to our residents.
I was going to say, the document that we received today in the mail is an excellent. The Halloween pictures.
short?
Yeah, the first page is a pretty good synopsis.
succinct?
It's
Okay.
colorful, it grabs your attention, and it
Okay.
was
so
easy to
it
read.
Really
Yep.
addresses the
Yep.
trick or treat.
Yeah, take a look at that.
We'll make sure it's
I
put
think
up.
90% of the concern is, how are people going to safely trick or treat as a family going around neighborhoods? And I think Commissioner Quinn's comment about, if people don't want to participate, they leave their light off, and if they want to participate, they can leave their light on and have candy and figure out how to safely disseminate it.
Agreed. I think we recognize that if we stop all participation, people are going to try to come up with something.
Yeah.
And that would cause probably a bigger gathering. So we do kind of, as long as we use some common sense and remain wise about it, which we've done in quite a few circumstances, but it's still a learning curve, and we're trying to remind everybody, stay on with the masks, keep going with the hand sanitizer, hand washing, all those things we've talked about all along. We're in it for the long haul. It's not the time to give up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim, thanks again. And thanks also for helping us with our health and safety plans. The board and the residents have probably received the fall Have a Good Times brochure. I'm excited and I'm nervous. We're trying to increase programming. We do have a really robust health and safety program. We are relying on some guidance from the school district to try and follow their lead on the best practices. And I thank Brian Barrett for that. The Park and Rec Department puts out the Have a Good Times each year, and Brian did want to mention something about that, and here he is now.
Thank you, Dave, for allowing me a few minutes to address the board this evening. I came to speak about the Have a Good Times. You may have received it in the mail. The Have a Good Times was mailed to all homeowners, and on the cover of the brochure, we acknowledged our neighbors and friends who are healthcare workers. We wanted to tell the stories, and we all saw the stories and the pictures of the dangers that our healthcare workers faced during COVID, and we wanted to recognize their efforts in keeping us safe during the pandemic. We started working on the summer brochure cover back in March and April, but due to COVID, we didn't ultimately send that out. But at that time, we reached out on social media to ask healthcare workers to send in their photos so that we could try to put a collage together to honor them. However, when we decided to use the cover for the fall brochure, because we thought, with COVID still impacting our communities, we thought it was a good idea to honor them. In the past 2 weeks, as residents have received the brochure in the mail, some have expressed concern about some of the frontline workers who were not included. And I think, some of those workers, including the police, the firefighters, postal employees, and others who've kept our community functioning during these uncertain times. Our caption under the photo said, "To first responders and essential workers," and I think that might be where some of the confusion rested. We should have been more specific and said healthcare workers, because that's who we were focusing on. And as residents and township employees, we realize the role that all first responders play in making our community a great place to live. And we regret that anyone might have felt excluded by us not including other frontline workers. Our focus was to honor the healthcare workers on the front lines, not to exclude anyone. I hope this alleviates some of the concerns that were addressed both to our department and to some of you who shared some of your emails that you received with us. And for any confusion, we apologize, and we hope that people understand what we were trying to do when we're not trying to exclude anybody. So, Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brian.
That's all I have this evening, Mr. Wexler.
Thank you, Mr. Berman. And thank you for that explanation. I knew the intent was, and I hope and pray that whatever we see here every week and every month, our police reports, our police committee, and the praise that we play on the firefighters, being one myself, I think I'm tuned to that. Mr. D'Amelio is president of one of the fire companies. We do appreciate all our frontline workers, but as you said, it was just the way it was written was interpreted the wrong way. But thank you for the explanation, and thank you, everyone, for your services. Our next item is item number 6, is the approval of minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the regular meeting minutes of September 14th, 2020.
Motion made. Second. Motion made and seconded. Any corrections or additions that you want to make? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item number 7 is the approval of warrants. Mr. Holmes.
Mr. President. Mr. President, I move we approve warrant number 10 of 2020 totaling $4,605,140.55, comprising the general and sewer fund payroll for September 17, 2020, in the amount of $633,581.40. General and sewer fund payroll for October 1st, 2020, in the amount of $617,690.56. General fund disbursements number 10 of 2020 in the amount of $2,897,075.83. Sewer fund disbursements number 10 of 2020 in the amount of $156,068.56. Community Development Block Grant Fund disbursement number 10 of 2020 in the amount of $155,940.67. A credit card statement ending September 27 of 2020 in the amount of $11,022.45.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any questions on the warrants? Our auditor has reviewed everything, as Mr. Holmes, I'm sure will say, and he's satisfied. So,
He has, and he is, and I recommend we approve this.
thank you very much. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. At this point, I'd like to ask for a motion to change our order of agenda. What I'd like to do is at this point, because we have the architects on our Zoom call, is item number 15, the Stadium Plaza Beatification Contract Award. I'd like to move that up to this point in the meeting, if someone would make that motion.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move we move the Stadium Plaza beautification. I don't think we're turning it into a
Beautification.
saint. I think we're just making it look prettier. So
There's a lot of people who would like to see a saint there.
I move we award that we move 15. Let's call it 15A, the Stadium Plaza Beautification Award, to now in the agenda.
Second.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay.
All right, give me a moment to plug the technology a second.
Or we see the agenda, we want to, somebody want to make
Yeah, I thought Mr. Oliva would use the recreation,
part
or Jerry.
Stadium, rec,
Stadium, who wants to do the stadium resolution?
Dr. Hart's.
Okay. Why don't you go ahead and make the,
Stadium.
Motion to award the Stadium Plaza beautification contract to BreezeCon LLC, King of Prussia, in the amount of $260,815, submitting the lowest responsible bid.
Second.
motion made and seconded. And now we'll have the discussion and the presentation of,
Mr. Galman, are you going to take the lead on this? Yeah, why don't we do that? I'm going to let Amy introduce the
okay.
Excuse me, just a little update. Back in probably 2018, the board had tasked staff and board engaged Spitzel Architectural Group to come up with a plan and a design to spruce up the Stadium Plaza, the entrance that fronts onto Darby Road. If you also remember, the project was bid out in 2018, and we had an internal budget, and the bids frankly blew it away. So we had to reject all bids and go back to the drawing board with the folks from Spitzel, and they came up with an alternate design. And COVID came and all that good stuff, but now we're back. And Jack Carmen and Chris Galman from Spitzel are here to give a brief overview of the design. And as Dave mentioned, it has been put out to bid. It was duly advertised. And we are ready, if you are ready to award a bid tonight after you see the design. So I'm going to go back and sit down. And Jack and Chris are online and ready to go in Davis.
Jack and Chris, I'm going to share my screen and you folks can take it away if that's all right.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Just give me a second to do that. Well, the internet's a little slow on this end, so why don't you go ahead and get started, and hopefully it'll come up momentarily.
Thank you. As Amy said, we tackled a redesign on the project to bring the project within costs. Jack will kind of go over what we did. As you know, we bid the project out and had 7 bidders who responded, and we got a fairly aggressive number, so we want to go over that with you too.
All right, thank you. Obviously, the cover sheet for the plans, if we could go to the next page. Yep, thank you. So just a quick overview. The plans entail the removal of the existing concrete that's out there now, demolition of the front area of the building, and then in the lower right-hand portion of the sheet, you can see the layout. So a new tinted concrete in the center entrance area and a paver section closer to the doors with the letter H, and then trying to retain some of the existing trees that are there. So the 3 trees on the left-hand side of the entrance will remain, and the 1 tree on the right will remain also. And around those trees, we've created a planting bed. And then within the plaza area itself, there are benches, trash receptacles, recycling containers, and so forth. Thank you. Helps see that a little bit better that way too. So you can see that the concrete is scored in a different pattern depending on the entrance as you enter the building. And that's the area that has the tinted concrete. And then the areas to the left and the right is just a regular untinted concrete area. You can see the benches again against the 2 on each side of the front of the building on the left and the right, and then a bench by each of the planting bed areas. If we could go to the next page, the next sheet.
Bear with me.
It's okay. No worries. It's fine. What we're trying to get to is then, yep, that's good. Thank you. We're close. That's the detail sheet. We could back up 1. No rush. That's good. Yep.
I'm sorry.
So you can see
There you go.
lower right area again illustrates the plantings that are going in. So taking what was or is a large concrete area in the front of the building and now softening it up overall with planting beds on either side of the front, and then plantings around the foundation of the building itself. And on the front of the building, we will have attached to the surface of the building screen for growing plants. So again, to soften the facade of the building. There's also new light fixtures that are going in to the front area. So that's a quick overview of the improvements that are proposed. As Chris mentioned, we had 7 bidders, and the low bid, we had sent out a letter dated October 5th. The low bid is BreezeCon, and the total contract amount is $260,815. The second low bid is LJ Polela Construction, and their bid amount is $356,127.03. Any questions at this point?
We should note too that the installation of the plaza will still allow the stadium to be operational through the other entrances, and as well as the hamburger place on the right-hand side. And we anticipate the construction, once they get the go-ahead, will take about 3 months.
Any questions for the architects?
When would that construction start?
The question was, when do you expect construction to begin after the contract is awarded and all that?
I would estimate by the time we go through all the bids and it's awarded, all the papers and are signed, may take 2 weeks. So we're probably looking at hopefully beginning the end of this month.
Thank you. Concrete work's not affected by the weather, I guess? That's...
The question on the concrete and the cooler weather.
This is, it's 6 inches thick. So your typical sidewalk is 4 inches, but erring on the side of safety and caution. And as you just mentioned, weather, the thickness of the concrete here will be 6 inches thick. In the event that also a vehicle may drive on it, it's not intended to, but in the event something happened and someone needed to drive across it, it would support a vehicle. So it will be resistant to the freeze-thaw cycles within this region of the country.
So if you had a prolonged period of cold weather, would that stall the project?
Right, that's what
Definitely, and are we better off just waiting to the spring?
So the question is project schedule. They're concerned with the cooler weather. What happens if we get some freezing temperatures? Does that delay the project? Does it make any sense to wait until spring to begin the work?
It's something we can discuss and look at. Something we can talk about. It hasn't been brought up before this, but willing to discuss that.
I would just hate to see, something started and then have a month or 6 weeks of bad cold weather, then you're stalled, and just anyway, just consider it.
And we can't, of course, control the weather, but through the last several years, we have been built through the winters pretty easily too. It just depends how things go.
All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, are we concerned at all about the drastic difference between the lowest bid and the second lowest?
Yeah, it was almost $100,000 difference.
The question is the bid numbers are significantly, for the size of the project, the bids from the lowest bidder to the next lowest bidder are pretty far apart. And the question is whether you have examined that and spoken to ensure that the entire scope is included, et cetera.
We have looked at all the prices. Yes, they're, as Chris said, they're kind of aggressive in their numbers, the way they bid it. There is a little bit of a difference between the low bid and the second lowest bid. But again, we've looked at all of the, as you said, they've addressed all of the items within the contract. So everything is covered. They have put prices on everything.
Were the other 6 bids relatively close compared to the low bid? Or what was the spread? You said there were 7 bidders.
The low bid, again, BreezeCon is $216,815. And the highest bid is $550,217.50. Premier Concrete.
Do you have any experience working with BreezeCon?
Have you worked with BreezeCon in the past?
We have not.
Have you checked any of their references?
And has your firm checked any references for BreezeCon at this point?
Not at this point.
Has our engineering firm any experience with this company? Okay.
Working.
Is there any way we could check some references? I mean, I know we were obligated to award contracts to the low responsible bidder, but often we find out after the fact that they're anything but responsible.
Well, perhaps the question is, what is the determination of somebody being a responsible bidder?
But part of that is that you then rely on firm, the architect and the engineering firm, when they put the bid together, to make sure that the bid that they're putting in is reasonable and meets all the requirements that were in that bid.
Right.
Which you're telling us it did. That probably makes it a responsible bid. I guess the question just is, and that's why I asked the question, if it's a $100,000 difference in 7 bids and they're all north of 350 besides this one, that's a third of the total project.
It's
The board is discussing the range of bids. I know that the folks who are tuned in on Zoom can't quite hear everything, and the board is discussing the range of bids. The concern that we are, if the board awards the contract, that we are bound to award to the lowest responsible bidder. And also they're discussing the definition of lowest responsible bidder and how that's determined. And so we do have some concerns on this end.
And
The
the disparity.
We can't really hear very well, but appreciate the
disparity
feedback and the
between-
follow-up. Thank you.
I'm sorry, the disparity between 1 and 2 is 100,000, but the disparity between 2 and 7 is 200,000. So, right, the second bidder.
Are they looking at the same documents?
Yeah, it's like they're all over the place. So, I mean, if our engineering firm and our architects feel that you have an idea of how much concrete they're gonna use, how many man hours it's gonna take, do they feel that that's responsible?
So to be clear, this Pannoni did not work on this contract.
I know, I
And so
understand.
they didn't review the costs or anything at this point.
But the
Who did?
architects and
So the architectural firm that we're speaking with now did review the contracts. And Jack, are you representing that you've reviewed the units and you are fully comfortable with the costs and the labor rates? I mean, we have some concerns on this end, and so I need some comfort from you.
No, we have reviewed all of the unit prices and are comfortable with the prices. They are on the low end. For instance, the square foot cost for the sub base and the concrete are on the low end. We sometimes see figures a little bit higher. I think they were around $8 a square foot for the colored concrete, and you may typically see $12.
What, can you articulate Can you articulate for us what went into your evaluation that these folks were a responsible bidder?
Jack, I'm not sure if you heard that, but the question was, could you articulate what went into your assessment that these folks are a responsible bidder?
Correct.
We are looking at the prices, and so forth, the bid items. We are not, familiar with BreezeCon. So
Did BreezeCon, I don't know if they can hear me, did BreezeCon provide for you any examples of other municipal projects of this nature or scope, size that they've done?
could you repeat?
The question is whether they provided any examples of similar projects, municipal projects that they've done of a similar size and scope.
They have not.
They didn't disclose it or they haven't done them?
Sounds like both.
The question is, they didn't disclose that information or they haven't done any projects like this?
They did not disclose it.
So who would be responsible, assuming we'd award this contract, who would be responsible for oversight of the actual construction project to assure us that we're not going to get halfway into this and have problems?
Well, this isn't a big enough project to have a separate project manager. It's not.
Jack, the question is your firm
Who's
going to
gonna oversee
oversee
the construction?
the construction of the project? And would you be responsible for ensuring we didn't have or encounter problems along the way?
Yeah, I just don't want them cutting
I'll
corners.
have to let Chris answer that.
Yeah, we would be reviewing the project through construction and confirming that they're installing per the documents that we have as we go along. That they weren't, shortchanging in terms of depth of stone and whatnot. We'd be confirming that it is going in per the documents.
Chris, I have a question, and that is, in the bid documents, timing-wise, is the board required to award at this point, or can they table it until their November meeting?
I think there is a schedule that is articulated in the specs, but I think you're able to do as you please. That was just a anticipated start date and completion date.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, the board could table the award of the contract tonight.
Yeah, and what I'll do is we'll verify that through the specs, and I'll get back to Amy tomorrow to confirm that. But that's I think where we would be.
And could we get them to maybe do some more research on BreezeCon to see if they have done any similar projects or?
Yeah, I think what Dr. Hart, one of our commissioners, is saying is that would give us an opportunity to review BreezeCon and take a harder look to ensure that they've done similar work and that we could be fully comfortable. So that would give the township that opportunity.
Not us. I think we're
Well, the
expecting
consultant,
that.
the opportunity to do that for us.
Right. Jack, we're okay with that, correct?
Yes.
Mr.
I
President,
think that will be done in conjunction with the township solicitor as well, if correct.
Right.
Mr. President,
Mr. Holmes.
President, I move we table the awarding of the Skadium Plaza beautification.
Second. Motion made second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion's tabled.
Thank you, gentlemen. The board did take a vote to table the motion on the award, and we'll be in touch in the next several days to discuss next steps.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Item number 8, finance contracts and authorization.
New 9?
Okay. It'll be new number 9, but
Yeah. Mr. President?
go ahead, Mr. Holmes.
Mr. President, I move we approve the additional 2-year contract with Tri-State Financial Group LLC of Bridgeport, Pennsylvania for the administration and collection of the township business privilege, mercantile, and local service taxes, local service taxes.
Second. Motion made and seconded. Any questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel,
Yes.
Mr. Lewis,
Yes.
Mr. Quinn,
Yes.
Dr. Hart,
Yes.
Mr. Holmes,
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item B,
Mr. President.
Mr. Holmes.
Mr. President, I move we continue our engagement with Attorney Jennifer W. Brown, Esquire of Flam Walton Heimbach of Bluebell, Pennsylvania, to serve as our special counsel in regards to the enforcement of township regulations regarding the business privilege, mercantile, and local service taxes, with the notation that any litigation pertaining thereto will be handled by our township solicitor.
Second?
Motion made and second. Any questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item C,
Mr. President, this next item is, deals with a resolution we passed several meetings ago. The motion is to withdraw our standing as an appellant in regards to the appeals filed as part of the countywide reassessment pursuant to Resolution 2187 of 2020.
Second?
motion made and second.
I didn't catch, who was the second?
There we go.
Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
No.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Passes 8-1. Item 10 is ordinance P19, 2020.
Mr. President,
Mr. Holmes.
I move we adopt the second reading of ordinance P19, 2020, adopting a second amendment to the lease agreement with Unisite Omnipoint PA Tower Venture LLC pertaining to the ground lease for the cell tower located at 1 Hilltop Road, Haverford Township, Pennsylvania.
Second?
Motion is made and seconded.
Mr. President, this is the second reading of an ordinance we passed last month. Everybody's aware of it and has the recommendation of our township manager and has the approval of this board.
Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item number 11, ordinance P20, 2020, traffic, second reading.
President, motion to adopt the second reading of ordinance P2020, rescinding establishing traffic restrictions on the following highways, parking of all vehicles prohibited at all times, rescind Cherry Lane south from Winfield Drive to a point 100 feet west thereof, Cherry Lane south from St. Denis Lane to Poplar Road, establish Cherry Lane south from St. Denis Lane to Winfield Drive.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any questions on the traffic? It's a second reading. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 12, ordinance P21, 2020. Enby Road. Mr. Oliva?
Yeah, I wish to adopt the first reading of ordinance number P21, 2020, authorizing rescinding traffic restrictions on the following highways. Rescind special purpose parking zones in front of 408 Steel Road, in front of 1300 Leadham Road, at 10 Tenby Road, and in front of 2940 Oakford Road.
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. Any questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio.
Yes.
Mr. Oliva.
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey.
Yes.
Mr. Siegel.
Yes.
Mr. Lewis.
Yes.
Mr. Quinn.
Yes.
Dr. Hart.
Yes.
Mr. Holmes.
Yes.
Mr. Wexler.
Yes. Item 13 is ordinance P23, 2020, fair housing accommodations.
Mr. President,
Mr. Siegel.
motion to adopt the first reading of ordinance P23, 2020, establishing chapter in the Township Code to provide a policy and procedure for reasonable accommodation requests under the Housing Act to eliminate barriers to housing opportunities within the township.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Discussion?
Yeah, have we decided on how we're going to do this?
Haven't seen the revision. It's in the,
Is it in the revision?
it's in your packet.
Well, let's talk about it, public's.
Right.
So what is it? I'm missing it,
Oh,
I'm
you-
sorry.
Yep.
The revision made to the ordinance simply allows for a member of the zoning hearing board and a member of the planning commission to be
I can't hear.
appointed. Can you hear me now?
That's, Kelly Hayes is explaining the revision that took place since the discussion last work session.
Thank you.
As I was saying, the revision allows for any appeal from the, application for the reasonable accommodation that initially goes to the township manager and/or his designee to then go to the Township Human Relations Commission. And the board now, the revision has the ability to appoint a member of the zoning hearing board and a member of the planning commission to help facilitate that discussion and that hearing and promote to give their areas of their expertise to the Human Relations Commission in helping them make that decision.
So they make the Human Relations?
The Human Relations Commission will make the decision with the guidance of a member of the zoning and the planning commission member. And then in the event that the applicant is not satisfied with the decision of the Human Relations Commission, they then can appeal that decision to the Court of Common Pleas.
And how about any resident that opposes any action, a decision made by the Human Relations Committee? Because honestly, they're not familiar with MPC codes, they're not familiar with those zoning codes. I mean, we can have someone from the zoning office and the planning, one from the zoning, one from planning?
As it's proposed, it's one from zoning and one from planning. Am I correct, Commissioner Siegel?
I'm looking
I'm
Mr.
having
Siegel?
a very difficult time hearing.
The question that you're being asked is whether the revision indicates that there will be a representative of the zoning hearing board and a representative of the planning commission providing guidance to the Human Relations Commission when they consider an application for a reasonable accommodation.
Yes, there would be. That's what we revised to include those individuals so that they had additional guidance. I also just want to make a note because I was asked before the meeting about this. The reason it goes to the Human Relations Commission is under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, which is adopted as part of our Human Relations Commission. They have specific authority under Pennsylvania law to address Fair Housing Act matters so that we don't have to create additional jurisdiction for anyone else by allowing the zoning board and the planning commission to have a representative that consults. We would comply with the Fair Housing Act, Pennsylvania State, PHRC, and our own. So I just want to give that as background while I have the mic for a moment.
So initially, when they first apply, who does it go to?
The township manager and/or his designee, whoever he may designate within the township to review that application.
And then when does Human Relations get involved?
Human Relations would get involved if the applicant was not satisfied with the township manager's decision. They would then have the right to appeal that decision to the Human Relations Commission.
So someone who lives next door will not, currently, as you know, when it goes before the zoning board, which, by the way, I just want to clarify something. I did speak with Mr. King today, and unfortunately, Dan, he doesn't remember your discussion about this. But having said that, the residents would receive certified mail or mail, regular mail, alerting them to a hearing. How would that happen now? If it goes to Mr. Berman, they're not going to receive anything. right? Am I right?
Correct, there would be no notice
Okay,
of,
so no notice goes to a resident, as it currently is now, that happens. And number two, my other concern is that when it goes to the Human Relations Committee or Commission, no notice goes out, correct?
as the ordinances are written, like with individual notice, just like they would in zoning or planning, go to like affected neighbors. I don't believe so. Those hearings are, I believe, publicized.
So, Commissioner Oliva brought up in the last work session that the possibility of expediting cases that go before the zoning board and eliminating fees. And that's still not a possibility where if that did happen?
No, just for clarification.
Okay.
Jim explained this at the end of the last meeting, that in the law says that it can't be, the zoning, can't go in front of the zoning hearing board. It has to be some other group.
Yeah,
And I think that's a really important step, though, too, that we're missing when you're phrasing this. Like,
I can't hear you.
how it happens now, is in violation of federal law. So we have to change them. Right. Like, it's not like we're voting just out of a whim to change them.
No,
We're doing this to comply with federal law.
I'm concerned that neighbors.
And Mr. Kane does remember one conversation, because we were all there when he interviewed for the position, and this was discussed.
He remembers being asked something about it, but he doesn't recall specifically what occurred because there were so many people in the room. That he did say.
Okay.
So, but he doesn't remember. And he also said that he put out an email that if anybody had any questions, as long as it's not a case that's pending, he would be willing to sit down with any commissioner. So he did say that. But anyway, my concern is.
I didn't get that.
Well, I thought he said that, so. But you can always call him, you know him.
Yeah, I don't
You know
have
him,
any
right?
concern. Of course I know Bob. I don't have any concerns with this thing. As Kevin just made
Well,
clear, it is not up to even a neighbor to have something to say in a reasonable accommodation issue.
Well-
There is very specific law that has to be followed. We're behind everybody. We are flirting with danger and have been for a decade, while we are sending people to the zoning board and the planning commission who satisfy the criteria for getting a reasonable accommodation under the Fair Housing Act. I mean, we have to act. And putting a person on the zoning board and the planning commission, not an option. For purposes of rendering a decision, the township manager, the township zoning hearing board, and the township planning commission shall each designate a representative to assist the Human Relations Commission in ruling upon the appeal.
Okay, so here's my concern.
That would only be.
Because I'm trying to get that out. Just let me tell you what my concern is. So someone goes before the planning commission, the Human Relations Commission, after Dave says no or whatever. My concern is that a structure can be built on a side yard setback that's almost right near the windows of a resident. What's the resident's recourse? That's what I'm asking. If it's something that they find so, appalling to them, does a resident who lives next door to this building or home have any recourse other than, can they appear before the Human Relations Commission as well?
I would have to look into that a little bit further. I mean, a resident should be able to come before the Human
Right, 'cause they
Relations
have
Commission
rights
to
too,
voice
right?
their opposition, but you also have to remember too, in a lot of reasonable accommodation cases, it is for some sort of medical reason or medical necessity that something is being done. And it has to be reasonable. It has to be like the least modification of your zoning ordinance or other regulations. So, I mean, they're not, an applicant isn't going to be given kind of free range to do whatever they want. They have to do what is needed to accommodate them so they can live
And they have to live
in the
within,
house.
do they have to live within our codes and the NPC codes? They have to live within
To the best extent possible.
that? Okay, that's good. I'm happy to hear that. My concern is for residents that have a say now, won't.
Right, but as Commissioner, I think McClaskey pointed out, like the way it is right now, where everything is going to zoning isn't proper.
Right, I got
We
it.
do need to make a change.
Thank you.
But do you know, are other municipalities, and we need to change, but do any other municipalities have a mechanism where a neighbor could challenge?
there are, I mean, other municipalities have other, I guess, protocols in place. Coming to mind off the top of my head would be the Swarthmore Borough, and Swarthmore has given their board has given the power to their planning commission to make that decision. I do believe that the better course of action here would be to give that power to the Human Relations Commission, kind of in conjunction with the state that has also authorized them to do the same. But there have been, to answer your question, yes, other municipalities have come up with other ways, appointed other boards.
Yeah, I think, but going more to Commissioner D'Amelio's question of just trying to allow a neighbor to have some voice.
Right, exactly. Thank you.
Is there, or have other municipalities?
I'd have to look into that and I can get back to you.
Would there be any problem if we provided notice to neighbors adjacent? We could just add that as a requirement?
That's,
Because the human relations meetings would be open.
they would be
So
open.
if you're an adjacent property, if you're affected, we could just provide them with a certified letter that a hearing is being conducted under.
That would only be in the case where they were denied from the township manager.
Right.
Correct.
So if.
Once it gets to that committee.
Well, I think if you're going to provide them notice, you also should give them an opportunity to speak at least, even if you're not going
I mean,
to.
they have to take public comment at their meetings.
Yeah, maybe I wasn't articulating that very well, but that's what I want. I want to be able to have residents that are going to be affected by any decision that the planning the Human Relations Commission
Have the
makes.
opportunity to be heard.
Yeah, they should have
Okay.
the opportunity to speak.
Right.
Again, it would only be in the appeal, right? So if the person asked for reasonable accommodation and the township manager would grant that, none of the neighbors would find out or know anything about it or receive anything.
As it's currently written, no.
Just want you to know that it's only when it's denied by the township manager that it goes in front of the human relations that then people would know.
And do other municipalities do the same thing? Does it go to the township manager first? And residents aren't alerted to that?
I don't believe so, no.
Why wouldn't it start with the Human Relations Commission?
Similar to like if you have a zoning issue, it goes to the zoning officer to make the determination whether or not something is kind of like doable within the zoning code. And then once the zoning officer makes that decision, it then goes to the next level. This is kind of just the progression here.
So why does Swarthmore not have that progression?
I do believe they do have that progression. I was saying
Right, the
instead of the Human Relations Commission being like that appeal board, Swarthmore has the Planning Commission.
Is the township manager there?
I believe so. I can double check it and get that answer for you, confirm.
And inherent in all this, we're relying on the township manager, who we rely on a great deal to run our township, to assure that it's a reasonable accommodation, which I would think the overwhelming majority of these would be ones where the neighbors would not even notice. It would just be something like, a slight over a setback or something.
Yeah.
Or like a ramp or something of that nature.
Right, and he does have a zoning officer on his staff that would rely on
And that
for
could very well be
expertise, yeah.
the designee.
So to go back with what Commissioner Hart was saying, so if there's an appeal, then the residents will be notified? I'm just trying to understand the process and make sure the residents hear the process.
As it stands right now, there's no
We
notification
would need to
process
put
written
that-
into the ordinance. We can look into that and we can certainly consider and discuss adding a provision
I
to
would
provide
respectfully
notice.
ask that we do that.
Yeah, I look at that carefully, because adding them as parties with standing to object to a reasonable accommodation may very well violate the rules
Right,
of a
I mean,
reasonable
'cause there's-
It's
accommodation.
reasonable to them, not reasonable to the person that lives next door.
It's not about
But it's not about
reasonableness
the
to the person
neighbor
next
per
door.
se.
That's not my point. What I'm saying is, we can't just willy-nilly add a notice requirement to all the neighbors if adding a notice requirement to all the neighbors creates a problem under the under the Fair Housing Act. I mean, there's a case site mentioned in here that talks about group homes and talks about the fact that they use the public notice as part of the planning commission hearing stigmatizes the residents and is one of the things that was held against the township when it was facing a lawsuit over the accommodations. So that's is an answer to the question. I have a feeling that notice to aggrieved neighbors is not part of it, and allowing aggrieved neighbors to talk at the first appellate process, I don't imagine would satisfy these rules. I think they would probably violate. It's clear at the end of this that any party aggrieved by the Human Relations Commission's conduct can appeal that in 30 days.
And appeal that to
Correct.
the Court of Common Pleas
Yeah.
in Delaware County.
So, but I mean, we had to be careful. Any greater notice requirements than that to neighbors is fine if it's allowed. But if that's like going to zoning or going to planning commission or is recognized as a potential impediment, what we're trying to accomplish here,
But
then
they're
it
not
can't go
sworn
in.
in. They wouldn't be sworn in, be going before the planning commission. They wouldn't be, the planning commission.
Well, I mean, I believe
There's nothing about
their
sworn in.
agenda's got to be
I'm saying
They're
these
not
are
public.
taking their verbatim
I
word
believe
down.
that it
Yeah,
is.
so
I
they
don't
would-
know how often they have public hearings or how often they're advertised, but yeah, they would
But
be
every board and
subject
commission
to-
meeting we have is open to the public.
Correct.
And they have a published agenda, and they're supposed to publish minutes afterwards. So that agenda would be made public, and they could, we can just publish it, make sure that it's known to the neighborhood. that-
Yeah, all I'm saying,
that's
and
all.
I'm sure our solicitor doesn't need to know that, but the public needs to understand that it's not as simple as saying, well, let's
Right.
give notice to all the neighbors. That may be a violation.
And
but
we
depending
will
on when-
confirm and look into that and see
situation.
what can be done to the ordinance, if anything.
I respectfully asked if you can look into that. And if you
Not a
can't, you
problem.
can't.
No, please do.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments? Please call the roll.
Actually,
If I
before
could-
we do,
wait.
before we're voting on something, I haven't,
One point I was going to make, this has to be passed twice.
Right.
If there's a
there's
significant
a subsequent-
change between now and a month from now, it would just be passed once. But in the event that this is done correctly, and I trust our solicitor and I trust our colleague to have done this correctly, I don't want to blow another month. And so I do think that we should consider this tonight, with the understanding that it may change if our questions to the solicitor are answered in a certain way, or it may not change at all, in which case it's still not effective until we have a second reading. So I would ask my colleagues to vote for it tonight, even though, in other circumstances, sometimes we say, let's not vote if there's going to be a substantial change. I suspect there won't be a change of substance to this ordinance, and then we don't lose a month. And if I'm wrong, we haven't harmed ourselves because we had to change it anyway.
And I believe that was Mr. Burns' advice last week as well.
Great.
Mr. Hart was going to say something.
Mr.
no,
Hart?
then, I'm fine with that. The other thing is just I don't have an ordinance to look at with revision.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, before the meeting, I didn't have one. I don't see it on here.
Oh, it's at the end of the,
I looked for it too.
Yeah,
unless I'm
it's not on
crazy.
my,
I just printed it. I'm sorry, it's at the back of mine. Do you want to look at it real fast before you?
no,
Hold on.
I'm
It's
gonna
short.
get to vote on it again next month, but
Okay.
we should have had it beforehand.
Yeah. It was
I didn't
in what
see
I
it either.
printed today. I mean, I printed this from Gloria whenever she
I didn't
sent
see
it,
Yeah, when it came out in email, it was in there.
and it's in there.
Mr. Hart,
Sorry, I
I had
believe
the
it
same
was in-
problem. I didn't see it, so.
I believe it was in a separate email. The agenda came in one and then the.
I'm sorry,
this-
Mr. Siegel, the
this came in-
question, the discussion is, certain commissioners did not see the revised copy. So that doesn't,
It's in the materials that Ms. Cugini sent, as I reviewed them to make sure it was.
It was,
And the section on appeals, for example, has the language that I added at the end of the last meeting
Why is he-
about the zoning.
I can't hear him.
board and the planning commission, and it also added the word building in certain places to address any code issues. But the copy that I have here, which is what Ms. Cugini circulated last Thursday,
Yes, Thursday.
is the revised ordinance following our discussion last week. And on the PDF, the main provisions dealing with appeals are on 129th page.
When did you make those changes?
Looking right at it.
Did you ask him when he made those changes?
Dan, you made those changes right after the last meeting, is that correct?
Right.
I made those changes at the end of the last meeting, emailed them to Mr. Berman and to Mr. Byrne. Mr. Byrne reviewed them because he responded and acknowledged those. And they are what is in the packet because there, section 9 of A is where the major changes were to allow the zoning and planning commission, zoning board and planning commission to participate or to give advice. And they're in my copy, and this is what I got last week.
I'm looking right at it. I'm looking at Outlook. I'm looking at Thursday, the 8th of October at 3:25 p.m. It's page 129 of the PDF, is exactly the sections that Dan's describing. And it's what I printed and what I brought with me tonight.
I didn't see it. Sorry.
Mr. President.
Yep. Good. Any other questions or comments before we vote? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio?
Abstain.
Mr. Oliva?
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Dr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes. Item 14 is Resolution 2190, 2020.
Yes, Mr. President. Mr. Move adoption of Resolution 2190-2020, multimodal application, pedestrian improvements intersection at Haverford and Ardmore Avenue.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Plusky. This is a resubmission of the grant that we did not get awarded from last year, so this is pretty straightforward to get those improvements at that intersection. Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio?
Yes.
Mr. Oliva?
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Dr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes. Item 15, Resolution 2191, 2020. Another multimodal application.
Mr. President?
Mr.
I'm sorry.
That's supposed, I thought that we were holding that.
Yeah, we're gonna defer that. That should not have been on the agenda.
Let's
Mr.
ignore that.
President,
We
I
don't have the
move that
numbers,
we-
we don't have the numbers on that. It's still with Pannoni, I believe, and we'll get that for next month, I believe.
That's correct, Mr. Wexler.
Item 16, contract awards. We've already taken care of the stadium. Public Works.
Motion to award a 2-year emergency sanitary sewer repairs contract to Nick Abenizio Contractors, Inc., Conshohocken, PA, in the amount of $351,130, submitting the lowest responsible bid.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any questions? Where's the sewer repair? Is this one,
This is a blanket contract for emergency repairs that occur from time to time.
okay. Any questions? Please call the roll.
Mr. D'Amelio?
Yes.
Mr. Oliva?
Yes.
Mr. McCluskey?
Yes.
Mr. Siegel?
Yes.
Mr. Lewis?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Dr. Hart?
Yes.
Mr. Holmes?
Yes.
Mr. Wexler?
Yes. Next item is a continuation of citizens forum. Mr. Berman, is there anybody on the conference call or any that wishes to speak?
One moment, please. I don't see any hands raised.
Any new business?
Mr. President, two short things. Various members of the Shade Tree Commission requested that we change the length of their term from, it's presently 5 years, and they thought 3 years was more appropriate. I thought maybe we could bring that up next month.
Okay.
And then the other item, we had asked the township to look into financing for the solar projects. I think we've all gotten some information back on that, and I wondered if we might refer this to the property committee to sort of review things at this point.
Okay, did we get Mr. Burns' opinion on the contract arrangements?
Wait, in terms of solar?
Yes.
We got a
There was a
memorandum
memo.
from Amy that addressed issues that were pointed out by our financial advisors, as
Right.
well as our bond counsel and our township engineer. I was actually planning on addressing some of those things tonight to suggest a suggested course of action for 2021. And not for us to take any official action tonight, but I was going to tell you what I'd heard so far.
Okay, you can tell us now, or we can do it at the work session next month, and then up to you. If you wanted to vote, if it's going to be an item that we need to discuss at length, that would be, make sense to have it at the next work session.
So, let me do this. I will, at my time to speak, I will speak summarily about this. We will then distribute this to everybody on the board. And now we don't have a work session until December.
That's true.
But that's okay. The important thing is that preliminarily, we have money set aside in our budget in 2021 in our capital projects for a solar project of any type. And I'll talk about the various things, but the key is it's in the preliminary budget. We can decide we would decide before the preliminary and decide between the preliminary and the final whether we want to go ahead with it. But there's some of the questions that I raised when we talked about this are addressed by our advisors. Some issues are spotted as opposed to necessarily resolved. And I have a suggestion as to how we may want to proceed, but obviously it'll be up to all of us.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I think in that report or the memo, there were suggestions about getting input from the engineer about feasibility, and that was where I was sort of looking at with the property committee, that maybe whatever way you want to approach it.
Yeah, there were some issues on the roof, and strength and replacement of the roof prior to doing any work up there.
Yeah, we could.
Practicals.
Right. I don't think involving any third parties into this transaction is a good idea. I think it complicates it. I think the cheapest, the most simple way for us to undertake a solar program is for the township to purchase the arrays, install them on township property, and get the advantage of and get the power associated with those. And we can really do those a building or a location at a time as they make sense. Some of the issues raised to us were whether any of the buildings of Public Works really would be appropriate for for a project that you hope would be 25 years on the roof, whereas on this roof, it's ready to go and perfectly situated. Do we need repairs on the stadium before we do something like that? But some of the initial questions that were raised about public bidding requirements, about the length of time it would take to get back our investment if a third party was involved, the issues of whether we can buy from another private entity, buy the energy. All those things are discussed in this memo, and at least lead me toward, and I'm going to recommend that we really make it as simple as possible and just make it a township project. Investment by the township in solar arrays on buildings we control, and in part to be able to benefit from solar energy, and frankly, in part for us to be leaders on this issue. So one of the alternative options suggested by our financial advisor is simply make the commitment to only buy solar energy from energy providers, and we could feel good about confining ourselves to solar energy. But the drawback to that is that we are missing an opportunity with our own assets to be able to generate solar energy. And we miss the opportunity to be real leaders in that, in the issue of, 100% renewable energy. If we miss the opportunity to take advantage of the new buildings and the opportunities we have to be examples for not just other municipalities, but then for private entities who are willing to make these commitments to the tops of their, shopping centers or their office buildings. That had been my intent, but I guess we've done that now. So we can, I'll distribute this, or Amy will distribute it to everybody, and we could plan to, frankly, we can just plan to talk about it when we talk about our budget on November the 16th. That third Monday in November, if folks are good with that. And since it would be a project involving real estate and other issues, it certainly would be something we could discuss in an executive session beforehand, if folks want to talk that way and if the solicitor okays that.
Good.
But I've done some of the follow-up on this, and it has not changed my zeal for pursuing this project, and I think the simplest way is the best way for us to do it, and that is the township to undertake it and just make that commitment in the actual assets themselves that generate the solar power and cut out a lot of the, not cut out, but not insert third parties into the financial or structural transaction, but we could certainly incorporate some of these eager third parties into our, into a task group that helps us pick the right manufacturer for these things, helps us in the process. And maybe even pick out, good private places for us to do this after we've done it at the public level.
Right. Okay, we'll discuss that at the budget meeting on the 16th then. Any other new business? Okay, just as a reminder before we go to other business, there is no work session, as Commissioner Holmes pointed out. Our next meeting is November the 9th. Preliminary budget meeting is on the 16th, and then the deadline for submissions of resumes for reorganization for our boards and commissions is Friday, November 13th. So anybody that wishes to serve on a board or commission, Friday, November the 13th is our deadline. Mr. D'Amelio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I hope everyone had a great Columbus Day off. Fortunately, I didn't have off. I want to talk about the election. Precincts 1, 3, and 1, 4 in my ward, where they usually voted, was 1, the Manoa Firehouse, and 2, Westgate Rehab, has been moved to the Manoa School. So I've had some emails from residents asking me if this was legit, and yes, it is. So if you received notification that those two precincts will be at the Manoa School, that is a legitimate announcement. So hopefully everyone gets to vote there. Two other things. The veteran banners that we have around the township, I think we've exceeded 200 banners now, and that's a great testament for honoring our veterans. So it's really great. I think, is there still room for more? Do you know, Dave? There is? There is, yes. Okay, so who do they contact if someone wants to put up a banner?
We have 135 miles of streets, so let's fill the poles with pictures of heroes.
Also, it's October is breast cancer month, and so many women today are suffering from breast cancer. My wife is a survivor of breast cancer, and I know this just affects so many women and men, believe it or not. So I offer prayers to anyone who's going through that this month, and please support the Susan B. Coleman Foundation. I don't know if they're not doing anything this year. I don't think. Are they doing anything virtually?
Virtual walks, I think.
Are they doing virtual? Oh. And please go out and vote. It's critical. So, a mail-in voting, if you have that, I don't know which one of my colleagues said that, there is time to mail it in. If you don't have a box to place it in, you certainly do have time to mail it in. There's also the option of absentee ballots if you cannot get to the polls because you're out of town or you have an illness or disability. There's also an absentee ballot, so please go vote. It's really critical, and I know we all can't wait for this election to be over. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Oliva.
I'd like to, of course, as Steve was saying, the voting precincts have changed a little bit in the second. We will also be my fourth precinct votes over at Manoa School. They will be voting there along with the first ward. But our first precinct, which is normally the Lanark Firehouse, is also voting at that location. So if you normally vote at Lanark Fire Company, you will be voting at Manoa School. If you vote normally at the court at the Falcon Center, that has been moved to Sacred Heart School. And if you normally vote at Sacred Heart School, that is the same. So we're combining precincts because of COVID. Once some of these restrictions are lifted, then we'll go back to allowing voting at those locations. I also, over the weekend, I volunteered at Oktoberfest, and what a great time, starting to get back into normal things. Not as many people as there were, everybody social distancing, everybody wearing masks, but it was nice to just go out and listen to some music. And I know volunteering for a lot of these Kelly music events, it's really something that really needed to be done. It was a lot of fun, and everybody had a good time, so wanted to pass that along. And as Steve said, get out and vote.
Thank you. Mr. McCluskey.
Just reiterate the concept of voting and how important it is, particularly this year. In the 3rd Ward, the 3-1 will vote at the middle school, as they have the last couple elections. 3-2 this election will return to the VFW at Grassland Park, as they have voted for many years. 3-3, there will be a change, and they'll vote at the old Haverford Friends Meeting House, which is on Eagle Road in between Merwood and St. Denis. There's parking at that location. There should be plenty of room. The concept was, as many of you know, who voted at the school district administration building, there's the ramp down, and with 3-4 and 3-3 both voting there, if there's any kind of backup, it would lead to coverage. So this has been done in large part to help make voting safe and easy, and assured in this time of COVID that everyone has ample space if there are any lines, and there's no issues. So every effort will be made to make sure the voting area is safe for everyone. Encourage you to vote. If you are voting by mail, voting absentee, however you're voting, please just make sure you vote. And then, as Mr. McCann's talked about, and he sent an email to all of us about sort of rededicating ourselves to be vigilant about wearing masks, social distancing, washing hands. As we sat here at this meeting tonight, there was an alert that came over my phone from the Washington Post that 20 states have reported record highs in coronavirus today. So, nothing has happened to dissuade this virus. Nothing has happened to make it go away right now. So we need to, I'm tired of it as much as anybody else. But for all of our sakes, I just encourage you to be vigilant, to do your best, to social distance. If you're going to events, be careful, and just wear your mask. Be safe for you and for those around you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Siegel.
Thank you. Just a reminder for people in the 4th Ward, the polling places remain the same, but I've had a number of calls from people who have not voted, who used to vote at St. George's Church. That polling place has been moved, and it was moved some time ago to the rec center, and that is where you will be voting if you had previously voted at St. George's, and that had changed a while ago. I'm going to just briefly comment. Everyone knows there's an election, and it is important that everyone vote. But also remember that you're not just voting for president, you're also voting for your congressmen or congresswoman, state senators, etc. There are a number of people on the ballot, so please look at the candidates, look at what they do and they say, not just their party or their advertising, and exercise your right to vote. It is extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Lewis.
I think everyone has touched on the election, so I'll spare you my thoughts on that. Just 2 things real quick. First off, Ardmore Avenue Bridge, it looks like there's a bit of a delay there. They're having some trouble, I guess, with railing on the bridge. So no firm date coming out of PennDOT other than a commitment to be done by late fall, which means December, 22nd. Hoping it's going to be much sooner than that. Commissioner McCluskey and I are going to meet, and we invite our colleagues, Commissioner Siegel and Commissioner Holmes, any other commissioner like to join us. We're going to meet with PennDOT on Friday at 2 o'clock, Chief, if you want to be there. Anybody wants to be there, 2 o'clock in the SEPTA parking lot. So we'd welcome anybody who wants to join us for that meeting. And then the other thing I had to wanted to comment on, I know Commissioner Siegel has repeatedly said that he has difficulty hearing the conversations. So I'm concerned that if he's having difficulty hearing the conversations, that people that are watching this at home may have the same difficulty. And I'm wondering if we should be have wireless mics or something put on anybody that speaks so they can be heard. So I don't know how much, I never go back and watch the meetings, so I don't know the clarity of the conversations if you're watching it at home, so. You could comment on that.
The audio issues are on, those who participate on Zoom are having the audio issues.
Okay, so if we go back and watch this, or anybody watching this live now would not have the same problem that Commissioner Siegel would have.
It's anybody who is watching on cable TV should be able to hear us much more clearly than those that are participating virtually on Zoom.
Okay.
Much to my chagrin.
Understandably.
I can tell you from experience working in a school that a lot of virtual class, we can fix that problem. We can actually get an external mic for the Zoom conference that's on his PC. I suspect we're using the microphone that's embedded in that PC because the microphone that's there, but we can actually get a USB microphone and attach it to that.
So anybody
it
that's
can-
participating by Zoom can actually, I think that's important that we do that for future meetings. That's all I have, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mr. Holmes.
Mr. President, thank you. First and foremost, polling locations in the 6th Ward, there have been changes. They're a little complicated. In June of 2020, all 4 of our polling places all voted at the Chestnut Walled Elementary School on Lorraine Street. The folks who normally vote at Normandy in the 6-1 precinct, you will return to Normandy at 2908 Normandy Road. So anybody who voted at Chestnut Walled in June, who votes normally at Normandy, you can return to Normandy. 6-3, which normally votes at the Lamb of God Chinese Church, but voted in June of 2020 at Chestnut Walled, will vote at Chestnut Walled again. A flyer did go out to every door in 6-3, and I believe official mail is coming from the county as well, because that change is a permanent change, not necessarily permanently to the Chestnut Walled School, but certainly for this election it is. But it is permanently away from the Lamb of God Chinese Church because of insurmountable ADA issues. So anyone in the 6-3 precinct, you will vote at Chestnut Walled again as you did in June. Anyone in 6-1 will return to Normandy, where you voted in all the previous elections except last June. 4 years ago, I spoke at this time in our meeting, passionately quoted the Declaration of Independence and just implored everybody to do the right thing on Election Day and set forth a parade of horribles that I thought would happen over the next 4 years if the wrong result happened in the election. I am now, 4 years later, nostalgic for that parade of horribles that I was worried would happen compared to what has actually happened to our country. So there is no excuse for not voting. There has been time for people to go through the mail process. If you can't do it or you're unsure of yourself, put on a mask, go very early in the morning and try to vote in person if you're not at risk and not concerned about putting others at risk as well. But it is absolutely crucial that we vote. So much is at stake in our country. And as Dan Siegel noted, There's a change in Pennsylvania law. There is no longer any big button you can push or any one circle that you can circle in your absentee or your mail-in ballot to indicate that everybody from one party or the other receives all your votes. There's no more bullet voting. Everything has to be voted individually for each office. And every one of those offices are very important for our future. So it's very important that you fill in each Democrat in each one of those votes. So that's all I have, Mr. President. Thanks.
Thank you for that wise advice, I guess. Mr. Quinn.
Okay, thanks, Bill. First off, I'd like to welcome the new policemen of the force here, joining the best force. So we're thrilled about that. And this past month, I lost two friends, one that worked for me and one that I grew up with, and it just shows you how powerful the battle with addiction is. And I'm thankful that we have groups here that help out and try to get some. But in a time like this, it's just sad to see young people succumb to this terrible disease. And 7-1 as opposed to vote, or when it comes out to voting, that has been moved from Brookline Firehouse to here. So they'll vote in this room here, and just go out and do the right thing and vote and make your voice heard. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Hart.
In regards to voting in the 8th Ward, pretty much things are the same. If you used to vote at the Brookline School, the 8-1, we had moved it in the past to Trinity Christian on Mill Road, and it will be back there again. All the other voting precincts, the 8-2 is in St. James Church, 8-3 is in Chatham Park School, and 8-4 is also at Trinity Christian Church on Mill Road. For residents who live near the Brookline School, the asbestos abatement program will finally get underway October 27th. I think it's supposed to last about 2 to 3 weeks. And then just to follow up on Mr. McCloskey's comments about COVID, it's surging here again. We are at levels that above where we were in the middle of the summer, which caused schools to start late. Unfortunately, Delaware County leads the counties around the Philadelphia area with the highest rates. This illness is real. I take care for a number of people who have been hospitalized with it, people who have had long-term, luckily no one has died, but people 6 months out still having issues related to the virus. So we need to be serious about taking care of it. President Trump received an experimental drug. Whether it was helpful or not, I mean, hopefully it was, but it's really a drug that is still in clinical trials. There's really no proof that it works. And even if it turns out to be helpful, the company feels they can probably produce 50,000 doses, which in a country of 350 million is not going to do too much. We do have an effective treatment or effective approach. Wear a mask, socially distance, wash your hands. It works, and we can get the counts down. That's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. Polling places for the 9th Ward remain the same. Wards 9-2 and 9-4 voted on Royal Avenue at the Bonner Fire Company in the Engine Hall. 9-1 and 9-3 voted at the Armenian Martyr Church on Edmonds Avenue. So those polling locations stay the same for the last couple of years. Go out and vote. This is also Fire Prevention Month. I'll put the fireman's hat on. I know the chief's there. It's kind of limited as to what we're doing. We're not going into schools as much, but we are distributing hats to some of the kindergartens and preschool programs throughout there. But keep in mind, it is Fire Prevention Month, so keep that in mind, and this is the time to practice your family drill and get an escape plan for all those kids. It's usually the kids that come home and say, let's practice. So we're missing that in school. So if you see this, it's a good time to look at it, change your smoke detectors because the clocks are going to be changing soon as well, and go from there. So that's all I have. Nothing else, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Oh, yes, yeah.